Hello everyone, welcome to Veterinary channel. Today we are continuing with chapter 2 of poultry housing construction in poultry production, and today I'm going to start by looking at some of the factors that we have to consider when siting a poultry farm or a poultry house. So the most important thing is the location and proximity. So this one is quite very crucial because when it comes to poultry production, of course, depending on the numbers, but the location actually has a greater impact on the profit making of poultry production. Why? Because we have to make sure that the location is quite close to the market source or to the geographical market target that we are having. And also secondly, we should make sure that our poultry house or our poultry farm is quite at least 1 kilometer far away from the other poultry farm, so that we can avoid diseases or the spread of diseases. Especially in poultry production, airborne diseases are quite prone and they can affect your poultry a lot. So avoiding spread of diseases mostly or roughly a distance of 1 kilometer apart would be much appreciable. But for layers, sometimes it could also extend up to 3 kilometers depending with the prevalence of the disease in your area. So secondly, we also have to consider about the accessibility. So as I said, in poultry production, what we also consider, what we have to look at mostly is also about how are we going to make profit. So we have to make sure that the environment or the farming place that we have chosen should be easily accessible all year round, so that we can make sure we have enough supply of feeds. We also have enough mode of transport in every season, even when it comes to rain and the likes, so that you won't have the delays, or you won't have some barriers that can affect you from the production that you have. Then also we have also biosecurity and disease control. This one actually, I think this is one of the most important factors that we have to consider. The first thing when we are looking at a house, or maybe when looking at a best farm site, we also have to research about the location of the area, because there are some areas where we know that these diseases are quite common, and sometimes, of course, maybe we're looking at the history, the history back, especially the spread of Newcastle, especially in the country of Zimbabwe. You get to see that there is a trend that sometimes come up and follow and go and the like. So we should also have that history, so that we know the type of vaccines that we should be applying, and also what we should be aware of. Because when we are now in the production business, and this problem starts to come up, it will affect us, and there's no going back, there's no changing of place. But mostly we cannot change places just because of diseases, because we have drugs that we can administer, and we also have vaccines that we can put. So it's something that we also have to research, something that we also have to consider and put in mind as we are starting our poultry production. Then also we have the water supply and electricity. So when we're doing a poultry housing, or maybe poultry construction, of course, it depends with the places or with the environment, but sometimes people try to cut costs by not including things such as electricity, and it is quite problematic, because you get to have a higher mortality rate of birds, especially when they're still young. Because of course, even if you have to start off talking about the heat temperature, sometimes we need heaters, and sometimes we also need to make sure that the cooling system is quite functional. So it is something that we should involve all the time, electricity, especially focusing on the African countries, and also the water supply. This issue of water supply is, we take it for granted sometimes, but we should make sure that our birds are having or are drinking clean water. So we should make sure that the site where we are siting our poultry farm is quite close enough, or maybe there's a good water supply that can supply our poultry farm all year round. Then let's also go on to the optimal conditions conditions that we need in a poultry house before we talk about poultry construction. So generally, for the temperature that enables birds to breathe well, to stay healthy, to lay eggs very comfortable, is actually around 22 to 30 degrees. So this is done in order to allow the body temperature of birds to come out so as they are processing or as they are living their normal life. Then also the relative humidity. This one is also quite important, and roughly it should be around 30 to 60% the humidity of the poultry house, that is the inside part of it. Then also have to look at the ammonia level. Of course, these things are things that we'll be considering or will be taking care of when the birds are already there. But these are some of the important things that I think before we start a poultry farm we should know, and we should be you should put those things in consideration. And how are you going to measure it? You need some thermometers, and for relative humidity, what you need, and the likes. Then also at the ammonia level, it should be less than 25 parts per million. And for the ammonia level, this is quite important. Of course, we know that it comes from the droops, from the droppings that come out, and mostly this one, especially the ammonia level, if it gets too high, it affects the breathing, the respiratory system, and we tend to have respiratory diseases that are occurring in our birds, and especially for broilers. Broilers have respiratory problems because just as what you experience with people who are quite a bit obese, mostly they tend to suffer, they tend to breathe very high, and mostly for broilers too, because they are quite big, and they also have much fat and also much flesh. Some of them they tend to have, the heart tend to get strained. So if we just suffer from mild respiratory problems, it might affect the whole batch. So this is something that needs to also be considered. And for temperature, this one I'm putting a greater concentration on it, because especially in countries like Africa, for example Zimbabwe, in summer it is very hot, and a lot of people they tend to have a higher mortality rate, especially in those periods, because the birds, they die a lot, and is when the temperature, the outwards temperature is more than the body temperature of the bird. So this creates really a big problem. Then secondly, we also have to look to consider litter moisture. Litter moisture should just be around 15 to 25%, and this one can be regulated actually by quality or maybe good management of within your flock. Mostly sometimes the litter moisture gets affected by the water that gets spilled, so you need quite good feeding traps, and maybe even water traps that are quite advantageous when it comes to saving water, and also that makes sure that the water don't spill on the floor. Then let's also go into looking at types of housing systems. So we have 3 types of housing systems, and the first one is free range or extensive system. Then we have a semi-intensive system. Then we have the last one, the third one, that is called intensive system. And on intensive system, we have the most common used methods, that is a battery cage system and also deep litter system. This one is quite controversial because sometimes people, they tend to say deep litter system mostly is suitable for broilers, and battery cage system is also suitable for layers. But you get to see that now there are also other advanced methods where battery cage system is also used for broilers, where sometimes they put even 10, or sometimes they put quite a big number into a certain batch into a certain cage that is so-called the battery cage system. So here are the differences. The deep litter system, so from its word, this is where the birds are just they're just laid on the floor, and the floor that is with litter, or maybe sometimes from wood shavings, or maybe some from sawdust, and of course we can use different methods, and as long as it is the method that can suck the moisture of the droppings, especially as the time goes on. So this one, when it comes to deep litter system has many advantages. The first advantage is being it brings a nutrient recycling, because the droppings, as I said, they tend to fall on the litter, and now as the moisture gets sucked by the wood shavings or the litter that we are having, this one creates manure, and can also be used in horticulture. So we can also have this environmentally friendly situation where our poultry are being used for other beneficial purposes to the next chapter. Then there's also a reduced labor. So the advantage, or the greatest advantage of deep litter system, is that we can take your birds from the very first day and up to the time they finish the 5th week without even changing the bedding. Sometimes this is possible, but mostly this works well when people are doing maybe when people have put the birds in maybe you increase quite a larger area, so that you know that the area that you have is actually suitable and it can accommodate that one. Or maybe you can change maybe sometimes after 2 weeks, but mostly for commercial purposes, sometimes people don't even change until they reach their maturity, and after they reach their maturity, as they are cleaning, then they remove all the litter. So it is quite it quite saves much labor, because you don't have to clean most of the time, you just have to manage. And especially if you now commercialize your poultry house and you put all the automatic systems of automatic feeding traps, now this one becomes much more easier and much more better, and you won't be having concerns of saving maybe sometimes high moisture on your litter, because there's no water that spills on the ground. But also this one also has some disadvantages, and the greatest disadvantage is disease control. So you see, a deep litter system, you can have at least maybe you can have maybe something like even 1,000 or 5,000 birds in one house, and those birds in that house, they are in contact with one another, all of them. Yeah, because there's free movement in the place. So this one, sometimes it might cause a problem when one gets sick, and it can affect the whole batch. And especially when it comes to respiratory disease problems, it can affect the whole batch, which is quite a bit more advantageous when it comes to when we're talking about deep litter system when we're talking about battery cage system, that I will also mention in the next couple of minutes. So that is also one of the greatest disadvantages of deep litter system. But and also we also have the cost of litter. That one is also is not quite a bigger expense, but when it comes to profit making, it is also something that people also have to consider. So as I said, the disease control is really a problem, and also respiratory problems can also occur, and also we might have ventilation challenges, especially when it comes to when you have a poor management of a good aeration. That I think I'm also going to mention when we are talking about construction of a poultry house. So these are some of the most maybe the best advantages, and also some of the disadvantages that we can have when we are talking about a deep litter system. Then let's move on to battery cage system. Now when it comes to battery cage system, this one is quite a modernized way, and it is more advantageous here and there, but for layers I would say this is more advantageous. And here are the advantages of battery cage system. The first one is space efficient. So the battery cage system, as I'm showing you, I think on this picture that you're seeing, you can put it in layers, from one to another, and in a way that it's quite heaped, and it saves space, and also creates a build up a large number of a flock that you'll be having, and this quite saves space. But is it necessary in Africa where you have a lot of space? That one, of course, it depends with your location and where you are. Then we also have an increased egg production. So the advantage of battery cage system is, sometimes one bird, especially for layers, sometimes they put one bird in each and every cage. So or maybe sometimes they might increase the number, but mostly it's one bird per each and every cage. So the chicken has its own feeding, has its own water, has its own clean feeding, clean feed and clean water. So there's a really less chance of maybe of saying the disease that can occur. And if the disease occurs, it can just affect one bird. It can have just affects the birds that are in just a specific battery cage, baby in a specific battery cage. And if it is that, you can isolate them and you put them somewhere. So this is quite easy to control diseases. And this one ends up also having quite an increased egg production because the number one, there is reduced rate of disease occurrences. They might occur, but it doesn't affect the whole batch. And also we tend to have clean eggs, because once it lay eggs, the eggs then fall to the fall down to the tray, and then they get distributed, and also the droppings, they fall on the other way. So really there's no contamination. And when it comes to egg quality, this is very important, especially for commercial purposes, and also when they are put on the market. You also know that some countries, especially for example in Europe, washing eggs is quite not allowed. So of course some other countries also too, it reduces the quality. Washing an egg, it reduces the quality of an egg, because you know the egg also has some pores that are within it, some aeration pores, and once you dip it in water, then you know it affects a lot of things. So to avoid those things, now the battery cage system is quite more advantageous, and you have clean eggs, you have your eggs. But when we're talking about deep litter system for layers, now these problems might arise because you need to be having specific areas where the eggs are going to be laid, and it's not going to be only one hen that will be laying those eggs. So it's quite problematic. That's why people tend to choose a battery cage system. But also it has a problem of the high cost effective, because it's very expensive. To cite that one is very expensive, so people mostly end up not choosing that one as an option. And also imagine in each battery cage you put one chicken. It's sometimes it's quite costly. But of course, when you are talking about quality, that is the one that brings you a good quality in your production of poultry. Then another problem also for this one is the leg problems. So the battery cage system, it doesn't have like wood shavings like when I said for deep litter system. So this one sometimes it tends to be a problem, because the birds, as they are on the floor, as they put their legs on the floor, it's on the wire sometimes. So this creates some problems on the legs, and this problem can also affect the production of the eggs. So it's something that people need to be to consider, and also need to be to take care of, especially when they're choosing also, and when they are placing the battery cages. They have to put them in a way that it doesn't affect the layers legs mostly. For broilers, I've seen some maybe where they would put like sometimes 5 or 10 birds in one battery cage. Of course other people they do it, but mostly the most advisable one is a battery cage system for layers. Then after this one, now let's also look at how we should construct, and also how we should make the calculation of the area required per number of birds that should be fit in the poultry house. So the most important thing to note is that for each and every square meter, there should be 10 birds. So 10 birds, they can fit into a square meter. So we should make this calculation according to that. So that means, for example, if we have 100 square meters, then that means you can fit in 1,000 birds. And now when we have 100 square meters now, then we need to make sure that the length and the width is divided accordingly. And here, most importantly, the length is quite flexible. But the most important thing is for the width. For the width, it shouldn't be, no matter how big your poultry house is, the width shouldn't be greater than they shouldn't be greater than what we call to 9 meters. It should be less than 9 meters. Why? Because we are trying to improve, we are trying to protect the air circulation process, because this one can also help, number one, humidity, can also help on the removal of the heat that is being released by the birds. So this one is very, very important. It should be less than the length, so that we can create an area where the air can move out and can move in and can pass away. So this was one of the most important things. Then also I also want to mention about the roofing issue. Yeah, the roofing issue, this one, some people, they don't take it quite serious, and other people also they consider it. But one of the most important things for commercial purposes, of course, I've drawn this one for commercial purposes, and also this one mostly sometimes people who are doing extensive farming, they can also have these structures. But if you look at the way the way the roofing is done, it is quite different, and I'm also going to mention about the benefits, and also why this one is quite more beneficial. This way of roofing is quite more beneficial than this way. So here is the advantage. So if you look at this one, of course we don't put ceiling in the poultry house, cutting cost, and sometimes it's not necessary. So putting a roofing like this, it creates this convectional currency of air movement within the poultry house. So and also the of course maybe the air ends up coming out of these gaps that we are seeing here, the mesh that we are seeing here. So it makes it even more possible. So now, of course, maybe when we are talking about the winter seasons, of course, these gaps, or these gaps where there's a fence, can be covered by a tent, and then the aeration will be increased. But this one, is for people who are talking of a low budget. When you're talking really of an extensive, often really intensive farming, it's easy. You can just put ventilators and your problem is solved. And this one, of course, we can. This one is quite easy, because when you hire or when you buy the ventilators, they will give you relevant information that suits you, that suits best for what you are going to do. So also, let's look at the meters that we should make sure that at least they should be involved. So here, for the ground, from the ground level, actually from the floor, from the land actually, up to the height where we start putting the mesh, we should just make sure that at least there's a height of 25 to 70 centimeters. And the reasons are that number one, from this area up to this area, we are trying to avoid a lot of things. Number one, we're trying to avoid predators. The first one, rats. The second one, snakes. So if we put at least a higher area, it can avoid. It can also give a barrier even from the dust that comes when the wind blows out. It doesn't fall into the poultry housing system. And also, secondly, now after we put it at 70 now, then that means what is inside and what is outside is quite differentiated, and it is quite really not necessary for you to put much. I'm talking about Africa mostly, to put a bigger, or maybe something that is quite big here. Why? Because when it comes to hot seasons, this can create problems when it comes to when we're talking about aeration. Of course, for areas where mostly it is cold, of course, this one differs. This one is quite different. Then from here, from the ground up to the ceiling, up to the roofing level, we should have at least 2.5 meters to 3 meters. This is in order to improve the aeration, because of course we can talk about a lot of things, but the aeration within the poultry house really covers a lot of things. Sometimes people end up saying they suffocated and they did what, yet this is just due to the fact that number one, there's overstocking, and number two, there's poor housing construction. So these are things that people should consider and people should take note of. And lastly, but really most important thing is the site or the location where the door is. And even though before we talk about the location where the door is, the windward side and the leeward side, it is also one of the most important things that people should consider. And here mostly we should make sure that these sides, especially when the wind where the wind prevails and where the wind really goes, those sides should be covered. And after those sides get covered, the rest is not quite important, but actually more beneficial for the aeration, and also to cut the cost, because it doesn't make much more sense actually to put a bigger wall. It's just one of my friend who is a doctor actually mentioned that chickens, they don't pay rent. So as you are building a good construction house, as you are building a good poultry house, you should also make sure that you make it cost effective, and this will lead you to a high production gain in poultry. Then as we are still there, location where we have our door. Of course, where we have our door is very important, but to control diseases, one thing that I forgot to mention is our fence, our area, our poultry farm should be fenced. And and them being fenced, we should also make sure that we avoid the spread of diseases. And this can be avoided easily by putting sometimes those traps where, if the truck is entering the facility, it passes through a disinfected water, and then it enters. And also at the door, I've tried to show this one as an easy way. People should also entering with gumboots, and people who should also considering dipping their gumboots as they enter inside, because the scent that we have, the ground that we have, the shoes that we'll be carrying, the shoes that we'll be wearing, it carries many diseases. And these diseases, bacteria and pathogens, these pathogens, they carry or they transport diseases. So it's really better to prevent than to work on curing things, curing diseases that have ended already in our poultry facility. And really, also the last thing to mention about poultry management is that we should mostly invest on preventing the risks that could occur than to work on curing the risk that we have occurred actually, or treating the risk that have occurred. And this is mostly when we're talking about the diseases, when we're talking about poor management, because it really affects the profit and the profit margin. So this is for the commercial aspect. Then we go on to the extensive system. The extensive system is not quite complicated, but the most important thing for the extensive system is about grouping. So quite different from this one. This one you can the commercial intensive farming. This one you can just say within the whole poultry house, you can just put all birds into the same one. But for extensive farming, or maybe for these smaller scale farmers, I would suggest that you divide your poultry house in such a way that you have different batches. Here are the advantages. Number one, if you are an extensive farmer, right, you don't have much capital. That is the really most important thing. You don't have much capital, and if the occurrence of diseases should be really minimal. So those costs, if you try not to avoid them, you experience no profit in your production in poultry, and end up just having poultry as a name and not as a way of productivity. So dividing these ones would be much better. The calculation is actually the same, and for layers, sometimes they say in deep litter system they say 9 beds per square meter. Of course, this give a benefits of their free movement, or maybe even the level of stress and the likes. But this is just the most important things that I have to mention about the extensive farming of poultry. Of course, the way it has to be designed, it sometimes doesn't have to be specifically like this. And also this one, since as I talked about the aeration, if you look at this one, the background of this one is quite covered. Is quite covered because it's actually a small poultry house. And this one now, if you put it like the commercial intensive farming poultry house, and when you have all the aeration in both sides, you really suffer a problem when it comes to cold periods, because already the birds are few, and since the birds are few, the temperature they release cannot create a good maybe cannot create heat in the environment. So there's no much greater need to lose that heat, and you can protect that heat by leaving the background of your poultry house covered, and you just leave a good aeration or a good air vent, a window that allows air to pass from there and also pass out of the outwards, or maybe this meshed front area, and this one actually is quite highly not less cost effective actually, and also has these benefits that once you do this, maybe when it comes to winter, you can just cover up the front party, and once you cover the front party, you will reduce also the problems. And also this one can also have maybe some advantages when it comes to the spread of disease, because if you have some batches, if the disease occur here, you can protect them and this batch cannot be affected. And also when it comes to cleaning, you can also clean from this region, and you also don't clean from you also not clean this other region. So it is just a matter of manipulating the area, manipulating the whole system in order to have something that is quite productive. So this is the video for today, and to next week we're also going to look at the next chapter about poultry house management. So if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe, and I would also like to hear your views and what you also need to learn about poultry production. Here is Dr. Kuzai Mushati. See you next time.